Streets are typically but not always named after landmarks. We'll look firstly at some of the themes that have given Norwich streets their names, then look specifically at the stories behind some interesting Norwich street names. Firstly, streets took their name from pubs, such as the Golden Ball, seen here in 1962. Streets around what is now Castle Quarter were named after activities associated with the cattle market, which was based in this location from 1738 to 1960 and is seen here just before its relocation to Hall Road. Some streets are named after the location of historic parishes which would combine to form Norwich and are illustrated in this map of the Anglo-Saxon town. Many of the city's historic churches gave their names to nearby streets, such as St Andrews, seen here in 1934. Don't assume that a name ending gate signifies a gate. It derives from a Danish word meaning street. However, Brazen Gate and Bishopgate are two which do recall old gates in the city's fortifications, and the remains of the Bishopgate can be seen on the left-hand side of the bridge. Theatre Street and Bank Plain both signify a theatre and a bank, Bank Plain having previously been called Redwell Plain before the arrival of the bank. Now looking in more detail at streets with unusual stories behind their name, beginning with Prince of Wales Road, built in 1862 to create a new route into the city centre from the station. It was named after Albert Edward, Prince of Wales, who had in that year, as part of his education, been sent on a 4-month tour of the Middle East. He would go on to marry Alexandra of Denmark and would become King Edward VII, but it is as Prince of Wales that his title would be given to Norwich's new road, seen here in 1937 and here in 2023. Next, Rampant Horse Street. From the year 1287 a horse market was held in this location. The street name came from an inn, but the inn, dating from the 13th century, reflected the history of the area. The Rampant Horse Inn closed in 1892, but is shown here on a map predating that. Behind that sheet of metal covering Debenham's doorway is a mosaic in the ground of a rampant horse, marking the location of the inn. Also lost under Debenhams was a street named Back Rampant Horse Street, seen here on the left. Rouen Road was created in the early 1960s, its name recognising Norwich's twinning in 1959 with the French city of Rouen. Rouen has a similar history, a cathedral and a castle. These photos show the construction of Rouen Road in 1963 with 2023 comparisons. Other twin cities are also referenced around Norwich. Gentleman's Walk, previously known as Nether Row, gained its name because it was a particularly fashionable area that became popular with the gentry, with a number of luxury shops. Nearby, Davy Place was built in 1813 after Alderman Jonathan Davy announced, to some alarm, that he would put a hole in the King's Head. In fact, it was the name of a pub demolished to give access from the marketplace. Opie Street is named after Amelia Opie, who was a novelist, poet and leading abolitionist. She lived on the corner of this street and Castle Meadow. The street contains a statue of her and was previously known as Devil's Alley. It had an even less appealing name before that. Bethel was an ancient Israelite sanctuary frequently mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. This street is named after the Bethel Hospital, one of the oldest mental hospitals in the country, built in 1713, extended in 1899 and closed in 1995. Its use is now residential. Duke Street got its name from the palace of the Duke of Norfolk, Thomas Howard, built in the time of King Henry VIII. It was rebuilt in the 1680s but largely demolished in 1711.
One wing was allowed to remain and would eventually become a workhouse and then a billiard hall before making way for the St Andrew's car park. While on the subject of palaces, Old Palace Road, seen in a few pictures here with former pubs on it, was named after a palace established nearby by Bishop Joseph Hall, who was forced to relocate after the cathedral was desecrated during the English Civil War. After his use of the building, it reverted to become the Dolphin Inn. Let's go into Barrack Street next, but first we better get rid of that shady character. That's better. Originally built in 1792 on the site of Hassett House, behind that wall, this was known as the Nelson Barracks from around 1920. This was the officers' wing, this was the soldiers' wing, and these were stables, all as seen in 1965. The site is now used for residential purposes. Trafford Road and the estate around it was developed by the Trafford family, who took their name from the village of Trafford, which is now part of Greater Manchester. And yes, that means there is a link with the old Trafford football stadium and more locally Wroxham FC's Trafford Park, all named after the same family, which can trace its roots back 1,000 years. Still on the subject of football, streets around Carrow Road Stadium are appropriately named. Geoffrey Watling was a successful Norwich businessman for over 60 years. He was president and chairman of Norwich City Football Club. He helped steer the club away from bankruptcy in both the 1950s and 1990s, and when he died in 2004, the club's statement read, "Were it not for Geoffrey, this club may well not be in existence." The Geoffrey Watling City stand is named after him. Stewart Road was named after James Stewart, who married into the Coleman family and had this street, made up originally of workers' cottages, named after him. He became an MP and a director of Coleman's, establishing a pension scheme for their employees. Apartments on Recorder Road were built by Coleman's in his memory, as were the James Stewart Gardens. Whilst we're on Recorder Road, here's a question: does anybody know why that road got its name? Let's conclude with my attempt at time-lapse photography of the James Stewart Gardens from winter into summer.